Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, another Yoshi game, a very rare NES game, and I Am the Night. I am your host, Jared, and today is April 14th, 1993. When a new character gets instantly popular, you gotta capitalize on that. Released on April 10th, 1993, was Yoshi's Cookie for the NES and the Game Boy.
Like your cookies! I know your cookies! It's happening everywhere! Confection craziness! Baked goods fattiness! Cookiness! New Yoshi's Cookie! Yoshi and Mario have a cookie factory gone mad! Only you can help sort them, stack them, and make them disappear! One player, two players, or four! Yoshi's Cookie on NES and Game Boy!
Yoshi's Cookie is a pure puzzle game. Line up the different shaped cookies by shifting them around, and when 3 or more of the same type match up, they'll get removed. More cookies are added as you go and clear the screen to move on to the next stage. That's pretty much it. In a game called Yoshi's Cookie, starring Yoshi, and is about Yoshi, naturally, you play as Mario. The opening cinematic shows Mario struggling to open a cookie jar, so then Yoshi eats the whole thing, and Mario tries to murder him for it. Mario then opens up a cookie factory to make more. I bring this up because after those intro screens, you never see Yoshi again, unless you count the cookie shaped like Yoshi's head. So the game is barely about Yoshi to begin with. The Game Boy version of Yoshi's Cookie is virtually identical, with the exception being that instead of a 2-player versus mode, with enough link cables and Game Boys, you could do 4-player versus. There is also a Super Nintendo version developed by Bulletproof Software, but that one will release a couple of months later into June. Yoshi's Cookie was developed by the Japanese company TOS, who is best known for having helped Nintendo make numerous Game & Watch games and are the co-owners of the legendary Starfy series. A game like this seems esoteric for a Yoshi game, let alone a game with Mario's face in it. It's like the idea started as something else and then became a Yoshi game. And that's because Yoshi's Cookie is a reskin. It originally began as an arcade game in Japan called Hermetica. Before going into full production, they created some test market cabinets where it did extremely poorly. So poorly that the developer sold the rights off to Bulletproof Software. Nintendo then licensed the likeness of Mario and Yoshi to them as they made it an SNES game, and contracted Ghost developer TOS to make the NES and Game Boy versions. Still, it was a Yoshi game, and people loved him. It was enough that it was the cover for the June 1993 issue of GamePro magazine. And of course, Nintendo Power gave a several-page preview in the April 1993 issue. Actual reviews for it, meanwhile, were fine. Electronic Gaming Monthly were generally positive, with an average score of a 6.75 out of 10. Nintendo Power awarded it with a 3.3 out of 5, and GamePro magazine was typically overeager to give positive remarks. Also, I'm assuming due to lack of competition, Nintendo Power called it the 5th best NES game for 1993 in their year roundup issue. If Yoshi's Cookie had a weird origin for you, check out this one. Also released for the NES this week in 1993, was Kid Klown in Nightmare World. Kid Klown for the NES is a side-scrolling platformer. Play as Kid Klown as the evil Nightmare kidnaps his clown family to force him into finding a secret treasure vault. Kid Klown can run, jump, and shoot balloons at enemies to defeat them and open item boxes. He can also inflate a balloon and hold onto it for a slower descent after jumps. At the end of each stage, fight a boss and collect strawberries to get extra shots during minigames between levels for health upgrades and more lives. Kid Klown in Nightmare World was developed and published by Kemco, who is best known for their Top Gear racing series and having done a fair amount of ports, like the NES version of Shadowgate. This Kid Klown game is part of the Crazy Castle series, also from Kemco, which began life on the Japanese Famicom system starring Roger Rabbit. When brought to North America, it was changed to Bugs Bunny in Crazy Castle. Then a sequel was made, Crazy Castle 2, which starred Mickey Mouse. Crazy Castle 2 was brought to North America as Bugs Bunny in Crazy Castle 2. Then a third Crazy Castle game was made in Japan, which still starred Mickey Mouse. When they brought Crazy Castle 3 to the US, it became Kid Klown in Nightmare World. Through all that cross-brand confusion, This is technically the first Kid Klown game in the franchise. The character would go on to get other installments like Kid Klown and Crazy Chase for the Super Nintendo and The Bombing Islands for the PlayStation. I did a video on the SNES one many years ago. Feel free to go give that a watch. The original Famicom Crazy Castle 3 game had many more Disney ties to it. It starred Mickey Mouse, and it was about him trying to rescue Minnie, who's trapped in a coma. The opening title screen had the Mickey Mouse theme song, which was removed, and the end credits played It's a Small World, also changed. A couple of the bosses were minor characters from other well-known Disney movies, which were also completely replaced for Kid Klown. Not changed was Kid Klown collecting strawberries, which for some reason they called chips? Kid Klown didn't exactly get a whole lot of coverage. I couldn't find any magazine advertisements for it, and the only review I was able to find was one from Nintendo Power in issue 46, calling it enjoyable but basically a baby game for babies. They reviewed it with an average score of a 2.8 out of 5. But then they reviewed it again in issue 47, where it had an average score of a 2.9 out of 5? Reviews used to make no sense at the time. I Am Vengeance, I Am the Night, I Am a Sweet Game, released in April 1993 for the Super Nintendo, was Batman Returns. Batman Returns for the SNES is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Play as the Batman and prowl the streets of Gotham, delivering out fist-shaped justice. Perform combo attacks, grab enemies and bash them down, grab 2 enemies at once, and use a variety of Batman's gadgets for additional punishment. By far the coolest feature, though, was grabbing an enemy and slamming them up against the background. Every now and then fight a boss, including Catwoman and the Penguin, and of course, drive the Batmobile. Batman Returns is based on the 1992 Tim Burton movie of the same name. It loosely follows the plot of it, but it also has just a bunch of clown enemies from the first Batman movie. It also has digitized screens from the film showing up as cutscenes between levels. This was a Batman game developed and published by Konami. This is notable because a majority of the previous Batman games were all developed by Sunsoft. Konami, having already cut their teeth on many beat-em-ups by this point, knew exactly what they were doing with Batman. There is a Sega Genesis version of Batman Returns, but that was developed by someone else and published by Sega. It is a completely different game, as it was more of a typical side-scrolling adventure game. The movie had recently come out and was a blockbuster hit. Fall of 1992 is also when Batman the Animated Series premiered, so by this time, everyone was all about the Batman. He was a hot commodity, and anything Bat-related was exciting. It was enough for Nintendo Power to make Batman Returns the cover feature for issue 48, completely overshadowing that the same issue had a preview for The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. They gave more pages of coverage to Batman than Zelda. Of course, it does help that the game is sweet. It's one of the most satisfying beat-em-ups ever made. Review publications also loved it. GamePro magazine gave it, what else? Perfect scores. Nintendo Power reviewed it with a high 4.1 out of 5, and when it came to discussing the best SNES games of 1993, Batman Returns ranked 8th place. Plenty of other games released this week, and for all of those, here's Editor Dylan.
The Great Waldo search for the SNES is a prime example of a wasted weekend rental. You're looking for the American version of Wall-E for a solid 15 seconds before moving on to the next level, of which there are only 5. You will easily beat this game before finishing even the shortest episode of Now in the 90s. Who likes Mad Max? Well, so did the developers of Outlanders. I'm guessing the license deal fell through, so they changed the name at the last minute. There's 2 types of game modes here. The first is a choppy driving and shooting section. The other mode is a very sluggish side-scrolling section. But rest assured, the game still has that licensed movie tie-in awfulness, even without the brand. How many times have I covered Fatal Fury this year? It feels like a lot. Well, this week we got the SNES release of it, and hopefully that's the last one for a while. I'm just not a big fan of the original Fatal Fury. I don't know, it just felt like it was missing something or someone. I just didn't care until they added a certain feature to the franchise. But I can't really place it right now. Maybe it'll come to me while editing this later. Or maybe I just missed the Neo Geo, which also got a game released this week with Sengoku 2. It's a damn good beat-em-up where you can play as an overly 90s sword-wielding, Jared, apparently, going through several different locations in different time periods. I'm glad it got released on modern platforms, because I'll never be able to play it on original hardware. for reasons. Sorcerer's Kingdom is a tactical RPG on the Genesis. It has some quirks that make it stand out, like the enemy encounters being reminiscent of Chrono Trigger, where they can be seen walking around the world until you initiate combat, and the combat is not great, at least at first. The attacks do seemingly random damage and enemies hit way harder than you right away. Normally in this situation I would grind my levels a bit, only the other unique thing about this game is there are no experience points. You can upgrade your stats individually, but I didn't get very far before moving on. Hopefully someone in the comments played this more, because this segment is not meant for long RPGs. Our final release this week is Great Greed on the Game Boy. A multi-hour long RPG, It looks like just your typical fantasy RPG, so I'll try to sum it up in one sentence. Now stop me if you've heard this one before. A wizard named Microwave teleports you into Food World, where you fight through the Empire of Sushi on your way to Shishkaberg and team up with Cupcake to rig an election for Cabbage Head. Typical Monday. Dude, this game kicks ass, and I can't believe I never heard of it until now. And I didn't sum up the game, that was just level 2. Need I say more? Now, cut to me saying more. For random battles, every action is mapped to a button in real time, so you can attack with A, dodge with B, and use different magic attacks with the D-pad. There's an autosave feature with multiple save slots. In a Game Boy game. Romance options where you can marry a princess, the queen, or even the king? In 1993, and the lighthearted, wacky humor strikes that perfect balance of being utterly stupid and wonderfully absurd. I'd say the overall charm to it is somewhere between Star Tropics and Earthbound. Now, if that sounds like your jam, I highly recommend you check this game out. Namco, what are you doing sitting on this? Put it on modern consoles already. Which leaves us with a grand total of 10 games released on these 5 consoles this week in 1993. If you were born the week these games were released, then happy Dirty 30. Now let's go bug Bandai Namco to re-release Great Greed.
Thanks, Dylan. Yoshi's Cookie wasn't too popular. Both the NES and the Game Boy version can be found for only $10 for just the cartridge. With the box and manual, they both go up to exactly $35. This week's biggest value gainer is Kid Klown in Nightmare World. It released with an MSRP of $59.95, and now just the game alone is currently worth $655. That's a 1,000% increase. And if you have that box and manual, it's then worth $860. It's the biggest value gainer, but the most expensive one is that Neo Geo game this week, because of course it is. Batman Returns for the SNES has done okay. It released with an MSRP of $59.95, and now the game cartridge is worth only half that. However, if it's complete in box, it's then worth $136. And that's it for today. Next week, a casino RPG, a Sega CD anime game, and the return of Sophia the Third. I'm your host, Jared, and this is Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like FarmCat84, Justin Blackwood, and Bozo Lumix. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this series, or if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this every single Friday. Anyone watching right now suddenly realize that they have Kid Klown in Nightmare World somewhere in their storage or attic or back at their parents' house? If you do, if you don't want it, I would happily take that nightmare fuel off your hands.